So today, we're going to talk about how AI is completely shaking up one of the world's oldest professions, auditing. We're going to see how it's gone from this old-school search for a needle in a haystack to, well, analyzing the entire haystack one digital piece at a time.
But before we get into the tech, we've got to understand why AI is such a big deal here. We need to talk about a massive challenge, a blind spot really, that auditors have been dealing with for decades. And that's the simple fact that it's impossible to see everything at once.
So, let's start with a story. A pretty wild one, actually. This is Harriet Walters. For 18 years, she was a tax manager in Washington, D.C., and over that time, she managed to steal, get this, $48 million. How? By exploiting one single fundamental weakness in the old way of doing audits.
She pulled this off by processing 239 different fraudulent property tax refunds. Now think about that. Each one was just a tiny piece of this giant puzzle, cleverly hidden in a sea of totally legit transactions. So the big question is, how on earth did she get away with it for nearly 2 decades?
Well, the crazy thing is, the clue was right there in plain sight. It was just almost impossible for a human auditor to spot when they're only looking at a tiny sample of the data. See, a whole bunch of her fake refunds were for these really clean, round numbers, like exactly $250,000. This is what forensic accountants call a fingerprint of fraud.
And this really gets to the core of the issue. Forever, auditors have relied on something called sampling. They basically check a small fraction of all the transactions and just hope they stumble upon something fishy. But in the world we live in now with billions, literally billions, of digital transactions, sampling basically guarantees you're going to miss almost everything. It just doesn't cut it anymore.
Okay, so that's the problem. Now let's talk about the solution. Let's see how technology is giving auditors a powerful new way to see the full picture. Basically, a brand new set of eyes.
And this is the absolute game changer. AI in auditing means we can finally move beyond sampling. So instead of just looking at a tiny sliver of the data, machine learning algorithms can analyze the entire data set, every single transaction. And they can spot patterns and weird anomalies that a human being could just never find on their own.
A good way to think about it is it's like a microscope for financial data. Or maybe even better, if traditional auditing was like trying to look at the stars with just your naked eye, AI is like wheeling out a super high-powered telescope. Suddenly, every little detail comes into sharp focus, and you start seeing things that were completely invisible before.
And it's not just magic, right? There's a whole process to it. First, the AI system gathers up all the raw financial data, the general ledger, sales, payroll, all of it. Then, it cleans it all up and gets it ready for analysis. Then the fun part happens. The AI runs its algorithms to find all the weird patterns. And what it does is it flags the highest risk stuff, which lets the human auditor do what they're best at, investigating and using their professional judgment. And listen, this isn't some sci-fi futuristic idea. The biggest accounting firms in the world are already using these powerful AI tools. So let's take a look at how they're putting AI into action, like right now.
So take a look at this. Each of the big 4 firms has built its own specialized AI platform. You've got PwC with Agent OS, which is this big enterprise-wide system. Deloitte has Zora AI, which is a specialist in finance. Then EY has a platform that deals with super complex global tax laws, and KPMG's Workbench actually coordinates whole teams of AI agents to work on audits. Pretty cool.
So what's the one thing all these different platforms have in common? They are just exceptionally good at spotting those little fingerprints of fraud we were talking about before, especially when they're looking at these enormous data sets.
Here's another classic example for you, the Satyam fraud over in India. What happened was, the company was booking millions in fake revenue using phony invoices. And guess what? A huge red flag was that so many of these fake invoices were for big, round numbers. An AI system analyzing 100% of the data would have thrown up a red flag on that pattern almost instantly.
So, what exactly are these AI systems hunting for? Well, they're programmed to find all sorts of weird stuff. Things like duplicate payments, journal entries that get posted at, say, 3 a.m. on a Sunday, those suspicious round number transactions we keep talking about, and maybe vendors who are getting paid in some strange pattern. These are the red flags of the modern digital world.
But all this power brings a whole new set of responsibilities. This tech is incredibly powerful, for sure, but it's really only half the story. The other, arguably more important half, is the human auditor who's actually using it.
Because with any powerful technology, you need a new level of oversight, right? Auditors now have to manage how these algorithms are making decisions, they have to make sure the whole process is transparent, and of course, they're handling incredibly sensitive financial data, which brings up all kinds of huge privacy issues.
So, to deal with all this, the industry is creating new frameworks, and they're all built on these core professional principles we've always had. Transparency, being open about how AI is used. Fairness, making sure the models aren't biased. Accountability, so it's always clear a human is in charge. And of course, privacy and professional integrity. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. AI is a tool. It is not a replacement for professional judgment. The technology amplifies human expertise and moral reasoning. It doesn't just automate it away. The final decision and all the ethical responsibility that comes with it always rests with the human auditor.
And what this means is that the job itself, what it means to be an auditor, is fundamentally changing. The role is shifting away from just, repetitive data checking. It's becoming this new hybrid function. The auditor of the future is going to be part data scientist, part ethicist, and part tech governance specialist, all rolled into one.
Which brings us to a final, really interesting question to think about. As AI gets better and better at finding what is wrong, the anomaly, the outlier, that suspicious transaction, the most valuable human skill becomes understanding why it happened. So maybe the future of auditing isn't so much about finding the needle anymore, but about being able to explain exactly how it got into the haystack in the first place.